the vindictive prosecution.
Double jeopardy.
One purpose in mind. Well, I thought it on double jeopardy. I thought double jeopardy, but they got around that by saying, well, yeah, you were convicted up in Maine of importation and distribution, but you weren't charged under the kingpin statute.
Oh, okay.
We got a new statute for you here. It took 2 years for me to just fight that aspect of the case, the double jeopardy issue, because the district court judge denied it, and I had to appeal it to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals before they could even take me to trial, the second trial in New York. And all this time, I'm studying the law, becoming a jailhouse lawyer, writing my own briefs. And then I figured, and I spoke to the other lawyers, and they said, you know, Richard, we think it's a good idea. We think if you get up there and talk and the jury gets to know you, you have a shot to beat this thing. And ultimately, even though I did get convicted in New York, in a sense, I won. Because my defense was that it was the only reason they were taking me to trial in New York was to try to force me to cooperate and give them mailer. And then when the judge sentenced me, after I got convicted, she said, on the record, the reason I'm giving you 25 years, the reason I'm giving you so much time, not because, she said, I agree with you. I don't think marijuana is such a dangerous drug either. But she said, you refused to cooperate with the government. Therefore, and she based my sentence on my refusal to cooperate. And that turns out to be illegal. The sentence becomes coercive rather than punitive. And when I got back to prison and started looking at the Second Circuit law cases that said you can't give someone more time for refusing to cooperate. You can give them less time for cooperating. But once the sentence is made to be coercive, it becomes illegal. And I appealed my sentence on those grounds, appealed to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. They vacated my sentence, remanded me for resentencing in front of a different judge who ended up taking the 10 years that they had given me, the additional 10 years that they had given me in New York to make a total of 25 and put them together with 15 that I already had in Maine. So in essence, even though I lost, I won, because I got no more time in New York for refusing to cooperate. I may be one of the few people who actually had his sentence vacated for refusing to cooperate. So,
now, what about your assets? Were they able to find your money and snatch all that up?
Well, they got all the physical property. I mean, I had the ranch in Texas. We had a place up in Maine that Mailer and I owned. So there was a lot of physical property like trucks and tractors and vehicles and, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, animals. I had a lot of horses. I had a lot of cattle. They got all that. They took all that stuff and they sold it all. God only knows how much they got for it, but it was a lot. But they didn't get all the cash because there was some cash stashed here and there that they never got. There was a house in Hawaii that they never knew about and they never got, which my girlfriend ended up living in. So, there was enough money around to pay the lawyers and to keep people somewhat happy for all the time that I was locked up. Of course, by the time I got out, there was nothing left. And when people came to me and offered to pay me the money that they owed me at the time I went away, and there was a considerable amount still on the street at that point, I just refused it and said no.
Really?
Because I knew that if I had taken that money, they could have, and then that person got arrested and said, well, I went and paid Stratton for a load of hash back in, then I was still part of the conspiracy and I could still go back to prison. And if I'd been arrested a second time after that, it would have been mandatory life with no parole.
Gotcha.
So there was no way I was going to get back in the business. And, I tell people this story, but it's true. As recently as 3 weeks ago, they tried to set me up.
Really?
I know, yeah. A guy came to town who I hadn't seen for many years, and he kind of shows up at where my son was having his Little League practice. Called me up on my cell phone. He said, hey, I'm in town, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm over at Pier 40. My son's having, he said, oh, yeah, I'll drop by and see you. So he comes over and he calls me and says, oh, yeah, I'm sitting out in my car. So I go and get in his car. Why does this guy want to see me? He starts talking about my book. Oh, yeah, I heard about your book. I want to buy a bunch of copies of your book. And I'm like, great.
Go to Amazon.
Go to Amazon. Yeah. Oh, by the way, he goes, I got some of your old bids, your some Lebanese. I go, wow, what are you talking about? Yeah, I got this load of Lebanese. I said, listen, forget about it. I have no interest in that business. I'm not involved in it anymore. I don't want anything to do with it. Then he starts talking about commercial Mexican weed. I said, forget about it, man. You're talking to the wrong guy. I'm not in the business anymore. Please leave and get out of here and don't call me ever again. Because I'm sure he was trying to set me up. I'm sure that they said at some point I found out later he had been busted. And he probably said, look, I could probably get Stratton back. And they thought, well, yeah, with his book coming out, he'd make a nice, trophy to put on our shelves. He wants to now start bragging about what he did back in the day. We'll lock his ass up again.
Gotcha.
So.
Now, let me ask you about this mailer story, okay? Because now I remember reading this in the paper in New York City when it happened. I remember reading about, I can tell you what I remember. I remember reading Norman Mailer was somehow involved in this 100-pound hashish deal, several hundred pounds, but that he somehow explained his way out of it because he said that he was researching a book. Okay, that's what I remember reading. Now, I've gone back. I remember this like it was yesterday. And I've gone back over the years, and I've tried to look up this story, and I could never find it. And I thought maybe there was imagining this. I even asked AJ. When AJ was on the show, I asked him if he heard about it, and he didn't know the story.
Well, you got part of the story correct. Basically, what it was, when I got arrested up in Maine, because don't forget, at that point, I had been involved with High Times Magazine. I had published in Rolling Stone, and I was known as a writer. But so I tried to say, my defense in Maine, my first case was that I was a writer and that I was doing this all as research for a book. That was my defense.
Right.
And I had people get up and testify, yeah, he was a writer. But the judge didn't go for it at all. The judge was like, yeah, you may have been a writer, but you were also very much involved in the pot business. He was angry with me. He didn't like my defense at all. Meanwhile, there was other guys up there. There was these Vietnam vets. Maine was a big area for smuggling pot, boats and airplanes and all kinds of stuff. And there was 3 other cases. There was the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. There was the, what were they now? They were the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, or they were guys who lived, they were white Rastafarians from Jamaica. And their defense was that they were bringing in pot they had a religious exemption, that they were bringing it in as sacrament for their church. And there was a guy named Brother Love who was like the boss of this. All these white Rastas, they were there in this jail. Then there was a bunch of Vietnam vets who were there that had been busted, and their defense was post-traumatic stress disorder. That they came back from Vietnam, and the only thing that they could do that would give them any kind of excitement like they used to get in Vietnam was to smuggle pot. So I come up there and I go, well, these guys have got all these creative defenses. I'm going to try this defense, which was that I smuggled pot as research for a book. And Mailer came up and testified at my trial. He was one of the people who testified on my behalf, along with Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is the writer of those historical books about the Kennedys and she's written several books, historical books. She's married to Richard Goodwin, who was a Kennedy speechwriter. She testified on my behalf. But yeah, he was a writer. He worked for Rolling Stone. I was going to bring Hunter Thompson up, but everybody said probably not a good idea to bring Hunter. He's so crazy, you never know what he'll say. So then but still, it didn't work. I got convicted. I got sentenced to 15 years. Now then, my defense in New York was, as I said, I was going to do what they call an affirmative defense, and I was going to call Mailer as a witness to testify in New York, and they wouldn't allow him to testify. The judge wouldn't even let him in the courtroom. She said, oh, it's intimidating for the jury. She threw him out of the courtroom. So then that was in all of the newspapers. And then there was a couple of stories that came out where they talked about how the government tried to set Mailer up. They had busted into his apartment over there in Brooklyn Heights. They had planted some pot over there, and they tried to set Mailer up. The whole thing with Mailer was that, he had written this essay called General Marijuana. He was one of the first legitimate, high-profile writers to write about his own use of marijuana, and he was also on the government's enemies list for the Vietnam War, for being an outspoken opponent against the war. He had marched on the Pentagon. So he was a government target. And then when they put me and him together, and we owned property together up in Maine, We owned a horse farm together. So their case was that Mailer is Stratton's friend. Stratton is a drug smuggler. Stratton makes money smuggling pot. Stratton pays Mailer for the farm. Therefore, Mailer is implicated in Stratton's smuggling operation. Not true, because Mailer, even though he knew what I did, he never invested money in it, and he never received any money as a result of it. He was very careful, as I was. The government was convinced. This is a time, don't forget they arrested that guy, John DeLorean, remember?
Right.
They set him up in a cocaine deal. They were looking to make cases against high-profile individuals. They wanted to make drug cases. Mailer became a target because he was an outspoken opponent of the government. So they would love to have been able to say he's just really been involved in the drug business, and they wanted to discredit him. That was the whole agenda that the feds had. And they made that perfectly clear to me. When I got to New York, they brought me over to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They had the DEA agents there. I became quite friendly, actually, with one of the DEA agents, who was a good guy. He was a decent guy. And they told me, they said, look, if you give us Mailer and some of these other people, there's a couple of guys in Boston they wanted me to testify against. James Whitey Bulger, give them information about Whitey Bulger, who I knew too, but who really, they didn't even probably realize it was actually working for the FBI all those years. So, they wanted to make these conspiracy cases against other people, and they made me an offer, and Mailer was at the top of that list. Give us Mailer, and give us some of these other people, and we'll figure out a way for you to walk out of here tomorrow. So that's when there was a bunch of news reports about that. Jack Anderson actually wrote something about it that was in the Washington Post about the government's attempt to set Mailer up. So it was a lot in the news at that time, and that's probably what you're remembering.
Now, did they tell?
One time I was at the dinner with Mailer, and a bunch of people. Jose Torres, the fighter, was there. A few other people, and the DEA showed up at the restaurant, checking us out, following us around. So, it's like the police state.
Yeah. Now, did they make you an offer and say to you, hey, Richard, once you rat out all these people, you can go back into business and keep selling marijuana, and if you get pulled over, you just give me a call and I'll get you out of it? And now a word from our sponsors.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Tina Helmuth is writing an ongoing series of fact-fiction books that boldly takes on today's most heinous crimes, the abduction, sexual trafficking, and cannibalization of our children. Suffer the Little Children, The Wrath of the Father, and Unbreakable. Deeply researched and mixed with the supernatural, good versus evil makes these thrillers hard to put down.